Welcome to the Zachrilege Cast podcast, YouTube video interview program that features me talking to some of the best and brightest in the atheist slash secular slash awesome community. This is episode number 75. We're recording live on November 22nd, 2016, or 2 weeks past American Armageddon. Thank you again to Grace Alexander for showing me the wonders of Uruguay. Want to leave the country? Check out her Expert Expats Facebook page for more fun tips. So Dan Simpson, our guest today, is not related to Homer, and he is not the next operating system for your iPhone. He wears many hats, or at least one: a musician, web designer, and street epistemologist, which I believe are the top 3 earning professions to have before, during, and after an apocalypse. Good afternoon, Dan.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having me here, Zach.
It's good to talk. Now, I finally had to answer the question, how early can I do a show and still drink? Well, 3:30 is a little too early, so I'm having a Pepsi Max, which is probably really bad because I'll have to mute every time I burp, but that's the way it goes. I don't know if you're still on the coffee or that's just an early thing for you.
You know, it's like, when I drink, it's throughout the day I'm thinking to myself, well, what time is it? Is it coffee time or is it beer time? And usually there's this little switch somewhere around 5:30. I'm like, I think it's no more coffee time. Now let's have some beer.
Okay, we might have to talk because we have the whole Bourbon County Stout thing coming out later this week, the local Chicago thing. Oh wow, we'll have to get to that. It's a special limited release beer, and I think in Chicago they even have a special, more limited version. But I don't know how deep you get into the. Pretty deep into the rabbit hole of the beer, but not today, sadly. So the way we usually start the show is kind of talk about like your own religious background and like how it kind of developed. Maybe there's some formative events you had in life that led you to where you are today.
I don't know, not especially. I can't think of anything that stuck out throughout my childhood that was sort of event. In terms of how I formed my own religious beliefs. I do feel like it just sort of evolved over time in the sense that I was raised in a somewhat Catholic, somewhat Irish Catholic religious upbringing. I would say it was probably a watered down version of the Irish Catholicism that my parents had received. And that was probably a slightly watered down version of the version that their parents had received, and so forth. You know, I just think by the time it got down to me and my brother, and I haven't really discussed this with my brother, he's a couple of years older than I am, but I think by the time it got to me, it just didn't really stick. And my parents didn't really take us to church very regularly throughout our childhood. So I would say about the time I was, 9 or so, I remember there was this sense of like, oh, I should be praying at night. I should be doing some of these things because apparently, it's bad if I don't. But I just don't really feel like I believed in a God at any really one conscious point in my life. I feel like the first time that I, sort of consciously thought about these types of questions, it just never really made sense to me. And I did that sort of at a young age. And then I think by the time I was 13, I would have recognized that most people around me and that I didn't accept a belief in a God. And from there's a lot of confusion because a lot of people think atheist means different things. And from there, it was sort of hard to find my own until maybe, I would say, in my high school years, I was dating a girl who believed in a God, and she was honestly perplexed that I was not like a bad, terrible person. I remember her asking me, why are you not a bad person? You don't believe in a God. Why don't you do bad things? I'm like, well, I just don't see that logic. I don't get it. Why would I want to do bad things? I do as many bad things as I do want to, actually. Precisely as many bad things as I want to do. And then, it wasn't really an issue for me, like religion or anything like that. I didn't go to a very specifically religious college. But by the time I'd left college, I'd found a book by Sam Harris called The End of Faith. Changed the way that I talk about religion. Or maybe it sort of allowed me to gain some confidence in my desire to do so. Because a lot of people say, don't talk about politics, don't talk about religion. are my favorite things to talk about. So why not? Let's talk about them. And I believe that now more than ever. I believe that we should be talking more about these things, more openly, more honestly, with more people, more often, I believe.
Well, I think that's something that we'll definitely be getting into during the talk today, is about being able to have these discussions, because man, what a time to need them. I think you're the first person I've talked to who really gets into Periscope, and I was wondering if you're like not the last person to use it, but I'm not sure. It seems like I can't tell if it's, it's one of those things with social media. It's like, oh, do I have to get into another thing? But so why do you like to do Periscope, and kind of what are your normal chats about? Because it's kind of just you hanging out with people and discussing some, current events.
Yeah, so I would say the discussions have been really quite wide-ranging. Sometimes I do get in there for the sole purpose of trying to find someone to interview about their belief. Sometimes specifically about a God belief. Those are great discussions. Found that there's a community, just with any social media, a community of people who are like-minded and who like to discuss the same types of things that you like to discuss. One of the main reasons that I think gravitated towards Periscope was because I wanted to practice street epistemology. And so I think we haven't mentioned it yet, so I guess we should talk about it. Street epistemology is a method, a dialectical technique of discussing people's beliefs and why they believe those things, and whether or not the confidence is justified, whether or not the confidence in their belief is justified or not. And it's a way to go about having that discussion in what I would describe as a very adult way. It's a technique for discussion that's really derived from Socrates, way back when, 300 plus BCE. So we're talking about way before Jesus. This Socratic technique of asking people these types of questions has existed. And Dr. Peter Boghossian has since sort of, I don't know how to describe it, sort of curated this method and has sort of tweaked it in a way that I feel like anyone, most rational people, can use this technique as a means to explore their own belief or explore someone else's belief with them. And pretty much the main idea is you're asking someone, what is your belief? And is the confidence behind that belief justified? And there's a way to go about having these conversations with people that does not make them double down, get angry at you, shut down. I don't know about you, but I feel like I've blown way too many opportunities throughout my life to have a reasonable conversation with people that that I care about. And because of that, I might not get another chance, right? I might have really blown it with them. And what I want to do is move towards a place where I can have these conversations more often in a more honest way, and be able to leave the conversation, first and foremost, with the opportunity to have another conversation later. Like, let's leave the door open so that we can keep discussing this at another time. That's really important. But also do it in a way that sort of explains to people, well, you're telling me your belief, but by me asking you these questions in this sort of way, I'm explaining to you precisely why I don't believe it. And it becomes really clear that this is sort of just a very respectful way to go about disagreeing with somebody. And I found it to be really quite useful. So, I'm sorry, got some honking in the background here. So so I've been using this technique for the past few months. Like I said, sort of founded by Socrates, curated by Dr. Peter Boghossian, and then I would say popularized by Anthony Magnabosco. What a great guy. He's on YouTube. He's got tons and tons of videos where he does street epistemology. That's his way of practicing. He goes out, he's got a clipboard, he's got a little timer, he times people for 5 minutes. He goes, "Hi, can I talk to you about your belief?" And that's just pretty much how it goes. He just launches right into it, and he interviews complete strangers. And he's, like I said, he has dozens, and I would guess maybe now 100 or so, or videos of him interviewing people. And this is how I learned of the technique. And then from there, I would buy the book and learn more. But then I decided, or I feel like I learned one of the lessons that they each taught me, both Peter Boghossian and Anthony Magnabosco. They were teaching me a lesson, not just how to do street epistemology, but I feel like the main lesson they taught me was to just go and do street epistemology. Because I feel like that's just the best way to learn. You can learn by watching other people have discussions, or you can go out and have those discussions yourself. So that's why I use Periscope. It's a really, he goes out and he's like at a really nice place, and he goes on a trail or someplace. Sometimes he's at on a college campus or something like that. But I sit on my couch. Couch epistemology maybe is more appropriate. But that's mainly why I use Periscope, is because I can use it to practice street epistemology.
The Periscope epistemologist. That could be it.
Yeah.
Patent pending. Yeah, you sent me some of those Anthony Magnabosco. Well,
yeah.
We'll I'd say we fix it in post. There is no post. But I will share some of those links to the YouTube links. It's not just the way he talks, but just to come up to strangers and almost, well, I mean, I only saw a couple of them, but they were religious believers, to just talk about it. And in both cases, he's like, "Hey, we're going to talk for 5 minutes." And then the timer went off. And one time they ignored the timer. And the second time he said, "You want to keep talking?" And I liked that those questions kept going on. As someone who works in marketing, there's a term called micro yeses. And I think in conversations like this, you got to get people to at least agree to keep talking, right? And that's a good way to do it. Mm-hmm. But have you hit the streets, or are you still thinking you're a couch guy?
I am looking forward to exploring different opportunities of doing this. Anthony's able to find places where it's not too much hustle and bustle, and I find that difficult. I find that could be difficult here in the city. So what I'm thinking about doing is taking another idea from another street epistemology type guy who also is on Periscope. He doesn't seem to do it as often as others, but his name is Paul Phillips, and he interviewed a local clergyman, and it was a great interview. Just went into the church and was interviewing this pastor, talking to him about why he believed what he believed. And it becomes patently clear that our spiritual leaders have no better reasons for believing in a God than, most people. Even the what I would describe as the apologists, the semi-professional, the amateur, and even the professional apologists are not. I'm just not impressed with what they say. And I just I open the opportunity, and I look forward to all the opportunities that I can take to actually interview these types of people about what they believe. So I'm trying to take a cue from Paul, and I'd like to start interviewing people, local clergymen. I mean, there's tons. I live in Chicago. There's a church every couple blocks. It's pretty insane. So I think I might do something like that. Otherwise, I don't know how I would apply it actually out in the streets. I'd have to get a little creative about that.
That's true. It is.
But I like what I do. To be honest, I am doing it on the streets. Let me take this back a step here. So I drive for a ride share company that I guess will remain nameless. It rhymes with gift, and it's a gift that keeps on giving because, you just get all types that get in your car. And I've wanted to do street epistemology with my passengers, but I've sort of held off because I don't want to, get fired or get a bad rating or anything like that. But I don't know about you, Zach, but I feel like now more than ever we need to be talking to people about what they believe and why they believe those things. It's getting really weird out there. We have this video coming out just yesterday of Richard Spencer giving a talk in front of 200 alt-right neo-Nazi supporters have given the Nazi salute, and we're just sort of looking at this flabbergasted. I guess it's the year 2016, and we're like, this is happening, and we have to really wrap our heads around this. So it just seems like, to me, more than ever, we need to be talking to people about why they believe what they believe. Otherwise, I'm just scared we're going to see more of what we see with Richard Spencer and his crowd.
Yeah, they say may live in interesting times.
Did I lose the question?
I think. No, I mean it was a good transition into straight epistemology and the methodology and all that.
Yeah.
Do you get it? I don't know. Is there like a level of excitement when you know you're like talking to someone who has a different worldview as you? And is it best to be Spock-like? Because you, from what I've heard, you seem kind of even keel when you're chatting here. Or do you have to kind of roll with whatever you're feeling, or when you're doing this kind of thing?
I think it's more Spock-like. It's almost more like you can't be like Spock, because it's almost like Spock doesn't have that part of him that we have. I mean, when you're talking with people about what they believe and why they believe those things, it's so easy, especially if you've had the conversation. It's so easy to be listening to them, hear something they say, and then just pounce like a tiger, just like jump right at it. Maybe they've worded something a little strangely. Maybe they've used a fallacy. Maybe they've referenced something tangentially related to their belief that you just think is false. But when we're having a conversation with someone about what they believe, there's got to be a certain sense of discipline to it. If you're going to try to expect to have consistently productive conversations, there's got to be a sense of discipline, and that discipline is what and why do you believe it? And then you just got to keep drilling down, drill down, and try to ignore what in street epistemology we call pitfalls. So it's sort of hard to illustrate, but effectively the idea is you just want to keep drilling down with them and try to ignore as much as you can so that you can focus precisely on their belief and why they believe that thing, and whether or not that justification, whether or not it's justified. One thing that happens is this. Okay, let's go ahead and give you a for example here. For example, you ask somebody, well, why do you believe in a God? And they say, well, imagine you're in a forest and you find a watch. Imagine you're in a forest and you find a watch. Is that watch, would you think that watch happened naturally, or would you think that watch had a creator? And I'm like, well, I'm trying to understand why you believe in a God, and you've used an analogy. Do you believe in a God because of this analogy? And they go, okay, well, let's jump to this other idea, right? And this is not a great example, but what I'm effectively trying to say is that a lot of times when you're talking to someone about what they believe, they'll give you a reason, and then you'll ask, well, how do you know that reason is true? And then they'll sort of jump to another tangentially related reason that doesn't really explain it. I'm not doing a great job of explaining what a pitfall is, but let's just sort of say that. And you could find there are actually great tutorials that my man Anthony Magnabosco does on YouTube. They're great tutorials that will sort of explain what pitfalls are. And of course, the book by Dr. Peter Boghossian, A Manual for Creating Atheists, that will also help you to identify those types of pitfalls. Because if I could just sort of keep it short here and in a nutshell, the main idea is you just want to keep drilling down. You want to drill down. What do you believe? Why do you believe it? How do you know that's true? And then a lot of times people want to jump out and sort of get down into another hole, they want to jump down another rabbit hole with you. And part of the challenge in doing street epistemology is keeping them down in one hole and just exploring one rabbit hole at a time.
Well, it's easy.
So yeah, that's why. Yeah. I'm sorry.
Well, Well, I was thinking it's easy to be distracted and sidetracked, and that's possible. And we said pitfalls. It made me think of like every debate I've ever seen between sometimes believers and non-believers, sometimes people who are talking about issues like abortion, and it ends up they're talking over each other, and they're not really getting into the reason why they believe it. They're telling anecdotes and trying to win. And like you said, it's interesting when someone explains why they believe something, they usually come up with an example that isn't the reason why they believe. It's something that they think sounds good and is going to win somebody else over to their side. And then when you like break it down, you're like, that doesn't work for me, but maybe it works for somebody. But I don't know. It's yeah, the whole concept of being disciplined. It's kind of like in my interview game here. Now I write all these questions down, but we're going to head a different direction. Sometimes I want to go down that direction. Other times I'm like, no. There's a reason why this is in this order. Well, there's not a reason. It's just what I wrote down. So,
yeah.
But it's often interesting to go on the tangents. But I'm guessing when you're looking for a particular goal in mind, figuring out somebody's beliefs, then you got to be disciplined. So it will take a lot of practice. I mean, do you try to do it? I mean, I don't know. When you say street epistemology, I'm automatically thinking of, in terms of religion, but are there good examples of other things? Like it would be intriguing to try it, like in terms of like sports rooting, like why do you root for a particular sports team? And be like, well, I was born in this city, or well, my parents moved there, and there's not a super great reason for it. When you really come down to it, you're just like, well, I've just picked the team, and that's where I'm going.
Like you've illustrated something where street epistemology can break down, which is sort of identifying preferences, more well suited for exploring claims of truth. So if someone says, Miami Dolphins are the best team ever, then you could go ahead and explore that like that. But if you go, well, I like Miami Dolphins, they're my favorite belief to explore. But what it's well suited for doing, claims of truth, such as I believe in a God, I think a God is true. And I'm starting to explore more and more about how to go about using it for, how to go about using it for political discussions. And again, it's difficult. It's like, well, you can't explore the belief Donald Trump is my preferred candidate. You can, but it's not. That's not what street epistemology is suited for. It's good for going after specific beliefs, or like specific reasons for why Donald Trump maybe is their favorite candidate, or Hillary Clinton, or Bernie, or whatever. So, for instance, I do have an example where I interviewed someone who didn't vote. And what I like to do there is try to determine what it would take for them to vote in the future. A lot of them are just outright, they're like, oh, I should have voted and I'm going to vote in the future. And I'm like, well, that's great. Problem solved. Then what you could do is ask them, well, if you would have voted, who would you have voted for? And I had one guy go, well, I didn't vote. I'm going to vote next time. And I'm like, that's wonderful. If I could have voted, I would vote for Donald Trump. And I go, okay, let's talk about this. I don't know about you, but I welcome this now. I'm in this place where I feel like it's more necessary now than ever to have these types of conversations. I want to have these conversations. And I want to find a way to make sure that on the other side of the conversation, when the conversation's over, that I have the door open for another opportunity to chat with this person. That's a challenge of mine. That's one of my objectives. This is one of my goals. So this is why I have to be disciplined. Otherwise, I'll revert back to what I used to do, which is, maybe you could say I put my foot in my mouth. Whether or not if I'm arguing with family or friends, and whether or not I was right or wrong, the way to go about having these conversations that doesn't make it more likely that the conversations are going to break down, that doesn't make it more likely that it's going to end up in anger, and doesn't make it more likely that the person will actually double down on their belief when it's possible that they could be wrong. So I found street epistemology, and that helped me to sort of do that. in a consistent way. So one of my objectives is to get on the other side of the conversation and still have that door open. Okay, so with this guy, I'm talking to him, and I'm sorry, I got a little tangent there. With this guy, I'm talking to him, he said he didn't vote. Tangential, yeah. And he said that he would vote for Donald Trump, and I asked him why. He said Benghazi. Oh, I've heard this a lot. Benghazi. Another thing that I've heard is emails, right? Hillary Clinton's emails. You'll notice that a lot of times people vote for Trump because of something that they think Hillary has done. And I've noticed that a lot. They hate Hillary. A lot of Trump voters hate Hillary. And I found a lot of these Trump voters as well would have voted for Bernie if Bernie was up. And we could talk about that too, but let's stick to street epistemology. So this guy said he would have voted for Trump because Benghazi. Why Benghazi? Well, why? Why? Keep going. Keep drilling down. Right? I can go, well, no, so what? It's not her fault, right? I could have jumped right there. I could have done that right there. Well, it wasn't illegal. She wasn't charged. They let her go, right? I could just. These are my knee-jerk reactions. That's me being undisciplined, but I don't say those things. Instead, I go, well, what about those 4 soldiers dying makes you believe that Hillary Clinton is responsible for Benghazi? Oh, well, she could have got him out of there. So you're saying that Hillary Clinton could have gotten the troops out of Benghazi without any problems, and she chose not to? Yes, that's what I'm saying. Well, how do you know that's true? Oh, well, I heard it. This is what he says. He goes, I heard it on a social media website talking to veterans. They said she lied, and because of that, these soldiers died. I'm like, okay, so you believe Hillary Clinton is responsible for these 4 soldiers dying. Without her actions, they would have been saved. And you know this is true because veterans on a social media website told you it's true? And he goes, yes, that's why I believe it. And I go, well, now that we have time to stop and think about it, is that a reliable way to know things that are actually true by veterans on a social media website? And he goes, well, no. And I go, well, now at the end of this conversation, are you less sure that Hillary Clinton is responsible for Benghazi? And he says, yes. And that's how you go about having those conversations. You got to really hear them out. If I would have jumped on it right away, if he says Benghazi, why do you think, why did you vote for Trump? Because Hillary's responsible for Benghazi. Oh, come on. She wasn't found guilty. They let her go. They did all the investigations. Trey Gowdy, he doesn't know what he's doing. La la la. I could just, right? That's what I want to do. That's that undisciplined part of me that wants to jump at it. But I would have never heard the part. What is his name? I think his name is Chuck. I would have never heard the part where Chuck told me that he believed this because of veterans on a social media website. I'm like, seriously? This is why you believe this? And you get to have that sort of sobering type conversation. And if Chuck is honest enough, he gets to say to himself, okay, maybe this is not a good reason. And that's why he said, yes, I'm less sure that Hillary Clinton.
Oh, looks like mid-sentence we lost Dan. Hopefully he'll realize the way he got dropped. So here we are in the middle of a good conversation. I think I was about to ask about something about a street epistemology training session where you wear a shock collar, and every time you yell at somebody instead of asking a question, you get zapped. I think that would be a fun thing to do. And it'd probably be more fun to do when Dan's here. I'm going to send him a quick message here and let him know my problem when doing interviews with people is you have one way to reach them, so I can't just send him a message on his phone. I got a little Twitter action. So yeah, it's street. Okay, so street epistemology. I was thinking hey, maybe I could do this in terms of sporting rooting, but it's right. It is more of an opinion thing, and my problem, of course, is I'm never really that certain about anything at this point in my life. So to be that strong. I think I would probably crumple pretty quickly in the face of questions about why you believe a certain thing. But it's good to be able to investigate what you believe and why. And get on there with Dan. He does Periscope, and as I said, not really something I've done very much. I think that's one of those things that I signed up for and never used. But what I liked about it is it's kind of like Facebook Live, and I've only done Facebook Live for like me talking about beer or sports. I've never done Atheist Talk because I'm still a little, iffy about being totally open on Facebook. But it's fun to do that because you get that instant feedback. When I do a Hangout, I have 2 viewers right now. I'll probably have one in a minute. There he is.
I think my Wi-Fi just cut out on me. I'm not
You
sure
were
what's
like,
happening.
all right, Zach, can you vamp? Go vamp. Go for it. It's happened
So
before.
sorry.
This is live, whatever this is. So it's all right. You're in the middle talking about street epistemology, and I had this great idea while you're talking about it, like street epistemology training video. I think this would be great. So what you do is you get like a shock collar and you put it on. And every time you yell at the person, instead of asking a question, you get zapped. Like,
Zap.
that's not true.
Yeah, that's good.
You're so stupid. I mean, how do you
every
know
time you
that?
say that's not true, zap.
How do you know that? National Enquirer? Okay.
Yeah.
But
right.
Maybe this is a bad question, but why in this world when we have so much information available, like bad sources are getting so much more traction? Or maybe they just have always got this much traction and we just didn't realize. That's possible.
That's possible. I don't know. I feel like we want to believe. We want to believe things. I got caught. I got caught this week. I caught myself, actually, and it doesn't matter. I still got caught. I got caught wantingly believing something that was just not exactly true. And I feel like this is a big problem. We live in a world now of fake news. The fake news isn't there. I read a great quote. The fake news isn't there to make you feel bad for getting duped. The fake news is there to make you not realize the real news is real. Something like that quote. Right? So we have to realize that now a guy sitting on his couch news that looks just as real as what as the real news. It's really tricky. And beyond that, humans, I think, have a desire to believe a lot of different things. They have a desire to especially believe things that confirm their biases. And I got caught this week, and I want to humbly and almost proudly talk about this, because we need to talk about this. Because if we don't know our own biases, we're going to get caught more often than if we do know our own biases. So my bias is this. I can't stand Mike Pence. Mike Pence, I think, represents something terrible in this world in many different ways. He seems like a decent guy. He seems like he means well, whatever. Everyone does. That doesn't mean anything to me. What means things to me is actions and what he says and what he believes, because we act on our beliefs. So it's clear to me that he's got certain beliefs about, we can go ahead and just say, about homosexuals, right? And one thing that I heard that I believed was that Mike Pence wants to electrocute gay kids until these kids are straight, right? Have you heard that before, Zach?
I think I had heard of that as some kind of like gay conversion, because the whole thing is, the connection is Mike Pence, gay conversion therapy. And now the question is, did he actually say he's in favor of gay conversion therapy, which is different than this electroshock part, which I feel like it happened in the 70s, 60s, 50s regarding many behaviors, but homosexuality probably being the main one. But probably not something that's been done recently, but it sounds real enough, right? And it sounds horrible enough. That's clear.
Yes. So let me just get this out there. We're not talking about whether or not there are places that electrocute gay people for the purpose of turning them straight. I'm not arguing that. That, as we know, I think exists. It's ridiculous. It's obscene. But what I want to do is get at this. I have a bias that I wanted to fulfill, which is sort of, how can I paint Mike Pence to be this terrible person? And one way that manifested was that I heard this, that Mike Pence wanted to electrocute gay kids. And then I believed it. Why? Well, it sort of makes sense. He's a terrible person. He's a monster, right? Oh, that makes sense to me. Monsters would electrocute people. I sort of caught myself the other day and I go, well, why do I actually believe this? I guess you could say I was doing street epistemology on myself. Like, why do I really believe this? What is my proof? Mike Pence wants to electrocute gay kids. Do I know this is true? How do I know this is true? And I realized I don't know how I know this is true. So where do I go? Google. So I Googled it, and Snopes popped up, and it effectively told me that there's very little evidence of him actually talking about this type of gay conversion therapy. There's only one instance that we could find, and it's in a bill, or it was in language that I think maybe he suggested for a bill, where it effectively says that some money should go to institutions where one could, elect to, I can't remember it, but specifically, but it was something about how if they wanted to change their sexuality or have, that type of therapy, they could do that. So with that said, some of that money could or could not, I don't know, go to these places where they're electrocuting gay people. I don't know. Someone could tell me and I would say, okay, well, that would be that. But so far I don't know, and there's really little evidence to tell me that Mike Pence actually wants to electrocute gay kids. So I feel like I got caught. He maybe wants to set aside funds to for gay conversion therapy. He says, he apparently wants to do that. Specifically electrocute gay kids, I don't know. I ask myself, is it actually more reasonable to electrocute gay kids, and that he just wants them to go to this type of therapy? Probably more reasonable. Now, with that said, is this gay conversion therapy terrible? Is it awful? Yes, absolutely, it's terrible. That he wants to electrocute gay kids. And so what happens, I realize, holy shit, there's my bias. It's right there, Dan. Because I feel like we might be able to argue that the other side used this help them win, to help Trump win, the other side, whatever you want to say. But you could say, or actually, that fake news something to do with the outcome of this election. So when I'm talking about how to know our own bias ourselves, sort of the act of trying to go high when they're going low. Gotta go. And that's why I do street epistemology. That's why I try to, I'm believing in things for good reasons. And that's why when I'm caught, when I get duped, do it proudly. I'm almost proud of myself. I told my friends something that was blatantly not true. Now I can't remember who I told this to, right? I've had those conversations. Oh, my pet, he's terrible. He wants to electrocute gay kids. How many people did I tell that to? And I was wrong. I try to figure it out. I got to make way. Anyways.
So there's a little bit of breaking up there by most of that. Just I don't know. Wi-Fi, so fun, huh? Yeah, there are plenty of legitimate reasons to not like Mike Pence. We don't really have to make it up. But it's really hard to go, you say, the high road, because people were telling me I need to read the work that Project Veritas, anytime you hear veritas or liberty or freedom, there's something nefarious going on, or at least you get that tingling. And that was James O'Keefe, who kind of lied about Acorn and got him defunded, and did a similar thing with I forget who that government, the woman working, like he totally took her out of context and people
Acorn.
believed it. And then the third time comes around, he's like, he's talking about Hillary. I'm like, why should I believe this guy? But the people who believed him before are like, great, sounds good to me. I don't know.
Totally negligent liar, if I'm not mistaken. Was he caught for lying and charged with that?
I think that's been the case, but it worked because, Acorn got defunded, and I don't know, everything the guy's done.
And Dinesh D'Souza, or
how
that
hard
guy?
is it to...
He's like
Dinesh
criminally
D'Souza
negligent liars.
tons of money, and he's like it's so funny that he talks about, Hillary as the subject of her being so, and it's like, wait, haven't you been actually arrested for fraud? And you try to pretend it's a left-wing conspiracy? Like the truth, like they say, the truth is always a left-wing conspiracy.
Reality has a real liberal bias. Yeah, I think those are great examples, actually. Alex Jones, Dinesh D'Souza, just sort of blatantly. What was that filmmaker kid?
James O'Keefe? Yeah.
Yeah, like these criminally negligent liars that get people to believe their lies because they want to believe them, desire to fulfill this hatred. Like, oh, I'm seething with hatred for Hillary Clinton. How can I fulfill that hatred? Oh, here's Dinesh D'Souza with this crazy ass fucking movie. You can't tell whether or not half the shit he says is true. But it works for some people because they have the desire to want to believe a certain belief. Just like I wanted to believe Mike Pence is, an absolute scumbag. That's probably true, but not for reasons that I was using.
So the first one of your periscopes I saw was after the election. I think it was about a week ago. And so why did you think that Mad World was the perfect song to play post-election?
Oh man, so that's just sort of like one of the songs that I do play from time to time. I just have a couple songs up my sleeve that I play at the beginning of the scope. Sort of like, I don't know, just Mad World in circles. It's sort of the idea. It's how you define delusional is. Input and expecting a different output. That's how you define delusion, right? So I do this. I don't know. I do this song. I also play "Faith" by George Michael. Sometimes I'll play that song. Yeah, Mad World as well. But sort of like remind me, like we're in history. Look back and reflect, and seemingly running into the same problems over and over and over again, believing the same thing over and over again that are just not true. Get to these beliefs is in a dishonest way. Then Trump, and it's becoming more clear to me. If I were to build a white nationalist neo-Nazi administration, I would do exactly as he's doing. Realization has become clear to me. I start thinking to myself, well, it seems like we're just running into the same that we've run to before, and not just in this country. Zealous leaders. I don't agree with anyone like Donald Trump. But, we see this all over the world. Great interview with Trevor Noah today. And Trevor Noah is talking about how, he's quite used to seeing what we're seeing here in America. Sort of a strong man coming to the forefront and taking the lead and sort of destroying nations is the best way to put it. Seen this before. And of course, we could point back to to Hitler, and that would be the easy comparison for so many people to make. But what I was thinking to myself, like we as a world seem to be making the same mistakes over and over, and we're expecting a different output. And because of that, it just felt like a mad world. Also, sort of a self-reflecting thing. I'm always thinking what I do differently. And that was a big day for me to reflect on, well, what I do and have a vision, what could I do differently? With that, what I do differently moving forward. So one of those things that I'm doing differently is in most discussions about people's religious beliefs to now trying to have these types of adult level discussions that encourage good epistemology, knowing things. I want to encourage that. And I want to do that in a more political realm, because it does seem like so fucking much. It does seem like more so than people's religious beliefs, at least here in America. Religious beliefs seem to have been tampered down. I'm worried that we're going to see them sort of be emboldened and inflamed in the next 2, 4, 8 years here. Clearly, political are influenced by their spiritual beliefs, and political action affects. So I'm trying to think about with people their political beliefs.
Well, Dan, I'm wondering, because the second time you came in, you've been breaking up a little bit more. I wonder if you could try to come out and come back in and see if that would help. Just because I'm afraid that people are going to miss some of your stuff, and I don't want that to happen. So if we can give that a shot again, and if it doesn't work, then technology has just failed us today. But you're saying things that people need to hear, and I don't want them to miss because of stupid Wi-Fi.
Give it a shot.
And even I think he dropped. Sorry about that. I feel like the last 10 minutes or so was it was like you'd hear about 2 sentences that really sounded good, and then 1 or 2 would break up, and I hate that because this is my ideal show. The guest talks a lot, and I just ask a question every 20 minutes, which is perfect. But sadly, I don't want this to be a bad audio experience. Hey, look at me being an audiophile. But I'm wondering what people think about the post-election stuff. And there he is. He's got a nice smile. He's got a nice head of hair. I mean, this is a
thank you.
Voice. He's got the whole package. So how's it going now? The third attempt.
Good. I think I'm back on Wi-Fi now. So I hope this works. I hope we have a good connection.
It looks good. So do you have because people I talk to, do shows or blog posts, and they're a lot more planned out than often I am. But do you just say, you know what, I'm doing a Periscope, and you just go, or do you plan in advance and try to let your minions know that you're going to be talking?
I'm sorry, you were cutting out there. Can you say that again?
Oh no, it's my turn. Well, what I was asking is, when you do Periscopes, do you plan what you're going to say, or you just say, all right, I'm going? Do you have a schedule to it, or is it just I'm talking? Oh
geez, I think we're doing that cutout thing again. I'm not sure. Yeah, I think you were asking me if I do like a regular thing, and so far the answer is no. It's not quite regular. There's no set schedule. I pretty much just sort of get on whenever I've been feeling like it. And I got to be honest, I'm going to be taking a little bit of a break, and I might be able to actually take a little bit of a step back here as I recoup and sort of reconsider how I'm going to go about having these types of political kinds of conversations. Also, I'm just, I got a lot going on in my life. I'm trying to find a new job and get some other things going. But yeah, it's nothing set, nothing like needs to be re-registered, so it's actually down right now. It's just idansimpson.com. But you can find me on Twitter at idansimpson. You can find me on Facebook, pretty much talking about the same types of things, at idansimpson, idansimpson as well. Same thing. But yeah, that's pretty much the main idea. No set Periscope schedule, but all of the Periscopes are saved. sort of like, there's a backlog of, I think, about 200 Periscope videos of mine that you could watch if you really want to. Some of them are really great interviews. Some of them I'm just bumbling around and shooting the shit with people. But you could pretty much tell which ones I'm doing where it's an interview. And you could pretty much tell when it's not an interview just by the title of the scope.
Yeah, I didn't know if Periscope, the whole thing was it disappeared after a while, or if you actually got to keep it. So it's good to know that there's a record.
Yeah, I mean, it's a setting. If you're a Periscoper, you can set it so that it auto deletes. You could set it that it auto deletes after 24 hours, or you could set it to save the videos, which is pretty cool. Actually, my first handful of videos were not saved because that setting was not there. Apparently, I think you could just watch them for a day, and then after I was Periscoping for a few weeks, they flipped it on so that it just saved them seemingly indefinitely. So my first few interviews are not viewable, which is maybe for the best because, I was just bumbling. I was just trying to figure out how to emulate Anthony Magnabosco. Specifically, what I started doing was just pretty much emulating Anthony. And sort of since then, I've developed my own style a little bit. But, generally speaking, SE is the same thing. Street epistemology is all about discussing with people why, what they believe, try to really define what they believe best you can. Why they believe that thing, and then drilling down even farther their confidence in that belief, and then drilling down even farther whether or not that confidence is justified. And there's ways to sort of go about having that conversation, again, in a way that that doesn't make the other person double down on their belief. It doesn't make them angry, and it makes it so that it's more likely that you're going to be able to have have a follow-up conversation with them, and that's super valuable because beliefs don't just change on a dime. Sometimes they move slow like a glacier through your head. It just sort of takes time. A lot of people, you could tell, want to get rid of their God belief, but you could tell they're working through it. It takes them time to let go. So it's good to leave the door open for follow-up conversations.
Do you think that street epistemology is not compatible with being kind of a firebrand atheist?
I think it's compatible. In fact, I would say firebrand atheism is, for me, it's just the same as counter apologetics. That's what it is. It's a really good way to. It's just it's aggressive counter apologetics, is maybe, if I could put it that way, is how I look at it. But counter apologetics doesn't have room when you're doing street epistemology, but street epistemology allows you to determine when you can apply counter-apologetics. Because a lot of times counter-apologetics, you're just wasting your breath. Blah, 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 blah. They tell you what they believe and you just launch into counter-apologetics. They tell you the reason, you just launch into counter-apologetic. But you haven't determined, sometimes we haven't determined whether or not they're even open to it. So that's what street epistemology does. It says, well, what do you believe and why? And then what you can do, and part of it is determining, well, what would it take for you to determine that you're mistaken? What would it take for you to determine that you're wrong? Questions you can ask somebody. What would it take for you to find out, hypothetically, that you're actually mistaken? Like, what hypothetical piece of evidence, what new thing would you have to see? The question again was about, I'm sorry.
It was just street epistemology versus like firebrand atheism, because it always comes off as, like you said, instead of having, like, you're trying to have a conversation, you're clearly asking questions, answering them, and trying to, of course, stay on point. Maybe, there will be, but usually firebrand is like, someone does, what is it, Pascal's wager. Oh yeah, I got this, coming after you, hardcore, instead of, well, let's deconstruct that and see what it actually means to you. Because I would guess if you're trying to quote unquote convert somebody, you probably want to see if they actually have any doubt first. Like if you're dealing, like Bill Nye asking Ken Ham if there's anything that would change his mind, and Ken Ham saying no, not sure if street epistemology is going to really do anything with him. It's going to, he's got the deflector shields up.
Right? And what Ken Ham is doing is he's demonstrating something that Peter Boghossian calls doxastic closedness. So he's doxastically closed. Another way of putting it is he's closed-minded. He's limiting himself to not accepting any new evidence. And he's actively closed-minded. That's really scary to me. I'm absolutely scared of certainty. I'm absolutely scared of absolute certainty. I have fear of it. I'm not absolutely scared of it, but I feel like absolute certainty could be a really dangerous thing, especially if we're encouraging others to use absolute certainty in their lives for things that they cannot be absolutely certain about. So Ken Ham does that, and he demonstrates doxastic closeness. Now with Ken Ham, you could say that street epistemology might not work for him, but I think the truth is we're able to have a conversation with Ken Ham in a public way, in a way that other people can see. Street epistemology can still be really valuable because you don't just hear. Street epistemology sort of cuts through the apologetics, and essentially it asks, well, why do you believe the apologetics are true? Like, it just keeps drilling down, whereas counter apologetics is more like just taking the ball, like if it's like a tennis match, it's like taking the ball and just hitting it back. But street epistemology is like they hit the apologetic to you and you catch the ball and you sort of look at it. Hey, can we look at this together for 5 minutes? Let's really and see whether or not it's actually made of anything, or if it's actually just and a lot of times you can have a more productive conversation because heard the apologetics, and a lot of them have heard the counter apologetics. At this point, we're talking past each other. Instead, why do you believe those counter apologetics helps you to, why does that counter apologetic help you to believe in a God? If you didn't believe this counter apologetic, would you still be as certain in your belief in a God? So someone tells you, I'm 100% certain in a God. And then you go, well, why? Okay. And then they give you the Pascal's wager. Without the Pascal's wager, 100% certain in your belief in a God. Oh yeah, I'd still be 100% certain. Pascal's wager doesn't really contribute to your belief in that God, does it? So let's talk about something else. Why do you actually believe in a God? Now you're having a real conversation.
So Dan, for your interview, would a dream interview for you be Peter Boghossian, or to be like a Steve Bannon or an adamant Donald Trump supporter, somebody whose beliefs you really, really are looking to get into?
I don't know. That's a great question. I'd love to interview Richard Spencer, that guy, the Nazi guy with them doing the salutes. I'd love to interview him. It's tricky though, because he speaks in code. He's very coded. I'd love to interview Donald Trump. I'd love to interview Peter Boghossian would be cool to interview, but I don't think he believes in bullshit, so I don't think that would be a great interview. I would love to interview like top apologists. I'd love to interview Ken Ham. I'd love to interview Ray Comfort. Cy 10 Brunninkate? I did get a chance to interview him.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, I got him good. I've heard
him.
He's bullshit.
I kind of stopped paying attention because I think he did Dogma Debate, and I know he did that debate with Matt Dillahunty in Memphis, and it just, that was one where it seemed like they were talking over each other. But when that's one that cracking that egg would be fun. So now that's something to check out.
So here's the thing though, like street epistemology is not about changing other people's minds. I want to make this very clear. Some people may feel differently, and that's fine. Even Peter Boghossian might feel that way. That's fine, whatever. But I think truthfully, you cannot change people's minds. Just as a fact of life, you cannot change anyone else's mind. You can be there for them when they're ready to change their mind, and you can help them to change their mind. But a fact of life that I truly believe with near absolute certainty is that you cannot change anyone else's mind. You know, I have no stress when I go into these street epistemology interviews in that sense, because that's not my objective. My objective is not to change their mind. Because if I do that, then my goal is biased in that sense. Because what if I'm interviewing someone who believes in what I believe? Their mind? No. Right? I don't necessarily, what I want to do is talk to them, what they believe, why they believe it, what their level of abstract level of certainty, sort of arbitrary. You do like a 0 to 100 scale is usually what we do. Try to ask them their certainty level at the beginning of the interview. You sort of go through the chat. There's a phase of the street epistemology, which I think is the best part of street epistemology. It's called the elenchus phase. And that's essentially when you take their reason and you pick it apart. And you give it counter examples, counter arguments. You just pick apart their reason. And then at the end, you try to say, well, is this a good reason to determine something that's actually true? And a lot of times the answer is no. And then you go, well, let's reflect that back to your original level of certainty, whatever percentage number they told you. And maybe they said they were 90% at the beginning of the interview. And then you go, well, are you still 90% that one of your reasons is unreliable? And in that sense, you get a very objective way, a somewhat objective way of determining how much they've moved on their belief. You still there? You look a little frozen.
Yeah, I'm still here.
Oh, you're good.
Can you see me? Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking in terms of Saitan, it's not like saying changing his mind, but his whole thing is presuppositional apologist, which is basically the only way to know God is to have a revelation. Well, he can know when he had a revelation, although can he really know? And how do you know if somebody else had a revelation? Like,
that's it.
If somebody else said, like, what's the difference between somebody having like some kind of psychotic break or making a story up or actually having, like, when people talk about spiritual or supernatural things, I'm like, there has to be a way to test it, like you test scientific claims. If it's repeatable or is it different every single time, there's no way to tell if it's real or not. And that's the part that's tough. Is like, well, I know God's talking to me, and I know, well, you could just say God's talking to me, but you'd be lying. But that whole, I feel like it breaks fairly easily, but not maybe from his point of view. I mean, changing his mind, that would be going into the mind of madness.
Exactly. That was pretty much the interview that I went through with him, except it wasn't about revelation. It was about being saved. He said that he was saved. I asked, should I want to be saved? He said, yes. And I said, okay. Well, how can I tell if I've been saved? And he pretty much goes, oh, you'll know, right? And I go, well, are you saved? And he says, yes. And I'm like, how can I tell when someone else is saved? And he goes, well, you can't tell when someone else is saved. I'm like, can you tell when someone else is saved? You're saved, apparently. Can you tell? And he goes, no, I can't tell when someone else is saved either. And I'm like, okay. Does that mean you can't tell anyone in the history of the entire world actually been saved? And he goes, yeah, I can't tell that. And I'm like, so then is it possible in the history of the world has ever been saved? Right? And he said no, because like he was saved. I'm like, well, how do you know? And it just crumbles, He's not based on an unreliable method, based on an unreliable epistemology. So if he can't know that anyone else has been saved, how can he know that he's been saved? I just can't, you can't get through to him. But, that was a perfect illustration. And this is why it's great, because it's not about changing their mind. Sometimes these conversations, if you're doing them in public, this is a conversation I did on Twitter. If you're doing this in public, other people can see. Other people can learn from you having these conversations. Just like other people learn from watching your podcast, and you have reasonable conversations with other people. We get to encourage that with each other, right? So I got to engage a medium to high level apologist on Twitter. I got to engage him in a relatively reasonable way. On that Twitter account, I had about 700 people following me. I have another Twitter account where I just pretty much do street epistemology, mainly. You know, we're all sort of like armed, just sort of like a little bit more for these types of conversations. And I want to encourage that. I want to encourage us not to be armed per se, but to be ready to have these conversations and to not be scared of them.
Good point. But so what's this street epistemology account if we want to follow this?
Repeat that, you're cutting out.
Your street epistemology Twitter account?
Oh, so I do have a street epistemology Twitter account. It's Zachrilege, and that's, you know, SIRLENCHUS, which I think is a Latin term. And elenchus is essentially, it's a Socratic, it's developed by Socrates and his gang of thinkers. And it's the method of taking the, you know, someone's reason for believing something and just picking it apart. And it's really doing it somewhat indiscriminately. It doesn't matter what the reason is. It doesn't matter if it's good or bad, because at the end, you should be able to say whether or not it's a reliable reason to believe something that's actually true. In that sense, the elenchus phase and Socratic questioning is non-biased. If there's any bias, it's being presented by the person who's doing the street epistemology or who's doing the questioning. But street epistemology, if used, I guess, somewhat correctly. So I do encourage people to go out and have these conversations with people who are demonstrating sort of closed-mindedness and who are demonstrating, you know, doxastic closeness. Because what you can do eventually is illustrate that in different ways and illustrate how that could be harmful to themselves and to others. You know, someone believes something with absolute certainty. Well, you know, how could that be harmful to you? How could that be harmful to others? And you can have that conversation. You could illustrate it like, you know, let's say someone, you know, street epistemology is really great for talking to people about faith, specifically faith. Faith, as, you know, maybe could be defined, is faith. They have a gap of confidence. They have a gap of justified confidence in a belief, and they fill it with the idea of confidence. Peter Boghossian says faith is pretending to know something that you don't know is true. Pretending to know it's true. And I think there's some value in that definition. But street epistemology is discussing faith and how it's a bad epistemology in sort of many different ways. And one of those ways is called the outsider test of faith. Have you heard about this? This is something developed by John Loftus. The outsider test of
John
faith.
Loftus, but
or maybe it's test for faith. I don't know. But the outsider test for faith is best explained. They tell you that they believe in a God, maybe the Christian God, right? And why do they believe in that God? Well, mostly because of faith. They say, oh, I have this piece of evidence, or I use this spiritual text. Well, why do you believe this piece of evidence? Why do you believe the spiritual text? You keep drilling down. A lot of times they tell you, well, it's faith, right? So, okay, is faith a reliable method for believing in things that are true? A lot of times people will say, yeah, it's great. And then we can go, okay, here's how I don't think it's a reliable method. Faith is a method for reaching anything. Faith is used by Muslims to reach their belief in their God. Faith is also used by Christians to reach their belief in their God. Faith is also used by Hindus to reach their beliefs in their gods, and so forth. How am I to tell, as an outsider, faith correctly? And that is the outsider test for faith. And you can ask any believer who uses faith, and we do this as a method to encourage them to use good epistemologies. I feel like when people find out they're using bad reasons for believing things, I feel like most people are willing to discard them if they're being honest about it. Some people aren't. It's because they're being dishonest.
Well, it's also a matter of if someone's attacking, like a Christian's attacking a Muslim, like, well, take the same reasons why you're attacking it and turn around on your faith, but mine's real. It's the power of Jesus, I believe, is what they would say. So How can people track you down to your show and Twitter and all that, and how to get in touch with you?
Yeah, cool. So I'm on Twitter at Simpson. I'm also at Zachrilege, like I mentioned before. You can find me on Periscope, and that's Simpson. I don't know. I feel like maybe one of these days I'll get a YouTube going, and that will probably be at Simpson. I'm hoping to put up some more live interviews and do something similar to what Anthony Magnabosco does, where like and interviews people face to face. I think those are great interviews. You see a lot that you don't see when you do Periscope. When you interview people in person, you see their body language, you see the way they react to certain questions and how they're standing, and you get a lot more information than you get from a Twitter conversation, or than you would get from a Periscope conversation. You could sort of see when you need to dial it up, or when you need to dial it down, or even back off a little bit, or even end the conversation. It's sort of easier to do that when you're face to face, or when you can see the other person at least. I'm looking forward to getting on YouTube one of these days, but
someday maybe I'll get on Periscope. Someday. Ooh, I'll take it. I'd say take on your audience, but it's a different kind of audience. It's good. So, well, thank you, Dan, for being on the show and working through the technical issues. If you want to support this show, you can go to patreon.com/Zachrilege, Zachrilege, and I can say it as well. No beer as opposed to beer, but next time we'll get on that. So follow me on Twitter, like the Zachrilege Cast page on Facebook, send all hate mail to zachrilege.cast@gmail.com. Thank you, Dan, for being on today. I can't believe we didn't have any cat interruptions, but there's always next time.
Yeah. There's always next time, and I'm looking forward to it. Maybe we can chat about it a little bit more, as I have maybe more experience doing these political type chats with people, as I'm shifting from doing more religious conversations to doing more political conversations, and maybe want to get my YouTube going too. Yeah, and we'll say hi. Maybe I'll have you on my show.
That'd be great. I mean, the political stuff is timely and important, and we can go with the crazy stories, the electrocution stories, or the neo-Nazi stuff, but the normal person who you're friends with or you're related to, more likely related to, who voted for Trump, yeah, you want to figure out what happened there. What happened? No, you don't say that. That's not a straight epistemology approved question. So for the listeners and watchers who are still on, thanks to the 2 viewers. Sadly, I can't see who they are. That'd be nice. Stay safe, and if you need to chat, I'm available. If you're an atheist and feel alone, you're not alone. Reach out. Let's chat and get that human connectiveness that keeps people coming back every Sunday. Stay skeptical. I love all y'all, and for Dan and I, good night.
Good night. Thanks.